and welcome to the Special Needs Sibling Podcast, where we talk about what life is really like as a sibling to someone with special needs. I'm your host, Charlene, and today our guest is Molly. Welcome to the podcast.
Hello, it is an absolute pleasure and honor, and I can't wait to talk. So thank you for
Yay.
listening.
Yeah, awesome. I guess we'll jump into it. Can you lay out your family structure? This is going to be a fun one because this is a fun part of your story. But yeah, if you could lay out your family structure, kind of your place in the birth order, who has a disability, and any fun facts about them.
Okay, cool. Well, I was adopted at 6 months old from Busan, South Korea. And my family, I am one of 12 siblings. So we grew up in an affluent suburb about 2 miles north, what's called the North Shore of outside Chicago, next to Northwestern. So a highly predominantly Caucasian environment,
Okay.
very high achieving, high performing, some of the wealthiest towns in the United States at the time.
Oh my gosh.
We grew up not just in idyllic Midwest, but in some of the most affluent. Our high school at the time in the mid 90s was the number 2 public high school in the nation.
Oh my gosh.
We grew up at our graduating class was 1,000. So we had 4,000 students, which is not as common in the state of Colorado, where I'm currently an administrator. So I am number 6. I was the first adopted. We have 7 other adopted in our family. 6 of us are adopted from South Korea, not biologically connected. We are all separately adopted. One is from China, and she is actually 10 years older. So my parents adopted her at 15. So she is actually older than me, even though I was the first adopted. She was the second adopted, but she's 10 years older. She was adopted in her teenager. Yeah, so she was adopted at 13. And then we have one that was in the south side of Chicago that our pediatrician just kind of said to my parents, hey, you seem to be down with this whole adopting thing.
Oh my gosh.
We got this kid who has sort of crack mom. And so he was the first one who went back to South Korea when he was in the military doing service.
Oh,
and so
funny.
It was the big joke that the Caucasian brother is the brother that went back to South Korea. So he was the first pilgrimage, but his really wasn't because he's Caucasian.
Right,
and he was born in the south side of Chicago. But that was kind of cool. He enjoyed it thoroughly and loved the culture. And he was actually telling us more about our culture as a individual who's a military individual than for us who hadn't been there since we were 6 months old. So we have multiple individuals that have disability.
Okay.
So we have the youngest 3 all had learning disabilities. The 2 youngest, Michael and Anna, actually have mild cerebral palsy. And then the film that kind of connected Charlene, you and I to Liz and I is actually the one of our sister, Take Me Home. Anna is the youngest, 33. She has mild cerebral palsy, but she also had a cyst on her frontal lobe. And so that causes very minimal short-term memory. And then her learning disability is about cognitively at a first grader. So as my parents continued to adopt, they actually were encouraged because they were in their 40s as adopted parents, not 20s.
Oh my gosh.
They had 7, 8 kids at that point. They were starting to ask our parents if they would adopt special needs. Which I found very interesting that actually, as my parents got older,
that they would get more complicated and more needy. Yeah, that's so interesting.
But I think the idea back then was, okay, you're in your 40s, you already have biological kids, you've already been successful parents of adopted kids, then you're probably better prepared to handle special needs.
Because they've already kind of gone through the ringer, but it's like ironic because they're older, so that's not in their favor, but yet the experience. Oh, that's such a weird.
So I think in the 90s it made sense, but now as we're older, and I know you and I chatted over the summer, like as we're older, now my 8-year-old parents are rearing somebody who's cognitively a first grader.
Yeah.
So that unfortunately is the flip side of it. That, they were probably mature and better parents when Anna arrived 33 years ago, but then now they're 80 years old taking care of somebody who's like a first grader.
Does she still live with them? Yeah.
Yes. So she is
Okay.
my parents are, well, specifically our dad is a
Okay.
full-time caregiver. Our mom has been going through in the last several years some severe hip immobility
Oh
issues.
no.
So
Okay.
she is, and she works as hard as she can and does as much as she can, but there does become sort of where our dad is a bit more, she's a bit more
Yeah.
dependent on my dad. So my
Okay.
dad is kind of taking care of our mom, who is just sort of been immobilized because of physical ailments. And then Anna.
Yes.
So at
Yeah.
80, that's pretty impressive, I think.
Yeah, that's
That's a lot.
yeah. I was like, it's so fascinating though, because it's just like it's just so different, and it's unique, but it's like that's the fun part that makes your family unique, but it's also like it's like there's a lot to it, but like hey, to podcast people can just listen to whatever they want, so that's the nice part about like just talking.
Yeah.
Um Yeah. So, on the podcast, we like to keep it pretty open forum because that's the fun part about like meeting other siblings and
Yeah.
like talking about whatever. Is there anything you would like to talk about?
I guess my question would be, as you've been sort of delving into these conversations, has
Yeah.
there been anything that sort of surprised you or sort of like
Ooh.
ahas that have surfaced as a fellow sibling with a disability that just gives me insight or the listeners insight?
I think the thing that is the most interesting is like the amount of like thematic similarities despite culture, distance, location, family size, and birth order.
Yeah.
Like I think it amazes me the level of things that I will still connect. And obviously, like so, I'm the oldest out of me and my sister. We're only 2 years apart, and so I obviously like will naturally connect with like other older siblings who are kind of in that situation. Which there's a good amount of people on the podcast who are one of two, and they're or you know even if they're not one of two, they're oldest, and then their sibling has autism. But so we will
Mhm.
connect obviously on very like detailed things about that. But I think thematically it's pretty impressive that I will talk to people from like Europe, Australia, Singapore, like and all these places, and it's the same, despite what the
Interesting.
disability is, despite their order, like their birth order in
Mhm.
their family, despite the size of the family. Like there's just certain things that resonate similarly, like with me, and then also like as I consistently talk to people, like it resonates within them also. Which depending on who they interact with, they may or may not be aware of that, obviously, right? Because it's like it depends if you
Yeah.
listen to it versus just talk to me. But it's yeah, it's I was pretty impressed because I didn't think about it from that standpoint. I only thought, oh, you know, people with my specific kind of family situation with a disability will kind of get it. But it's been really interesting to talk to like an age range too, just because I've talked to people who are like in their early 20s. I've talked to two people that are 70.
Yeah.
So it's amazing, like just the commonality and like and obviously like things are different. And I think the other thing that I find pretty interesting is like the because of the age, the more interesting thing is like when their sibling got diagnosed and kind of how that process was, because I feel like that is
Mhm.
kind of different. Like got yeah, because kind of like because Anna is slightly older than me,
Yeah.
um but that's still different. That so that like her and my sister's diagnosis might be like semi similar, but that's still different than your and my experience because we are not the same age, right? That's what
Yeah.
makes it really interesting, kind of like yeah, like talking to people.
Yeah, no, and so to clarify, like I'm sixth out of like, and and then my sister Liz, who
Yeah.
wrote and directed the film, and I produced, and it was sort of like a family affair. That's
Yeah.
the least expensive route. Let's be
Right.
honest, independent film.
Yes.
You just
I'm all
hire
about
everybody
least
that you don't have to
expensive.
pay for. So
Yeah.
but I would say that's interesting that Liz and I, in our family structure, and I don't want to sort of overstate something that I haven't asked my siblings directly, but I would
Hmm.
suppose they would agree, and our parents, that, and I've kind of said this because I'm an administrator in education for many years, that I kind of wonder if that's why I'm pretty even keeled, is because I was sort
Mm.
of the youngest of the oldest. So I was the first adopted. The four older biological siblings were all under the
Yes.
age of 10, and our parents couldn't go to other Asian countries to go assimilate and be with your child for 6 weeks, like some countries kind of require when you're.
Oh,
And
okay.
so South Korea back in the 70s was sort of that post Vietnam. There was a need. It became sort of an economy in South Korea, and so they were allowing transcontinental adoption. So Europe, United States, etc. They're
Yeah.
allowing that to happen, but you didn't have to go to the country, the home
Okay.
country, and sort of spend 6, 8 weeks, which my parents didn't have when you had four kids under the age of 10. Like
Right.
that's like a full family. That's more than the average census. And so I think it's interesting that I sort of have been able to be a pretty balanced human being because I was kind of the youngest of the oldest. So I was sort of taken care of and exposed to things at a young age you probably shouldn't be because
Right.
you're obviously the oldest. But
Yeah.
then I also was the oldest of all the adopted, or I was the first of the adopted. And so I was sort of the older sibling to a ton of young siblings.
Oh, that's
And so that
interesting.
leadership
Yeah.
that I think I have from that is I got to sort of learn from, but then also lead because I was smack, Liz and I were smack in the
Like
middle of
literally in the middle.
in the family
Yeah.
dynamic. We're kind of the ones that lead a lot in the family. Like whether it's dealing with sort of where our parents are at or getting family reunions going or sort of
Yeah.
leading some of the communication, we end up being leaders in our family as middle kids, if that makes sense.
That does.
Kind of
It,
interesting, you
it's
know?
it is yeah, that's like a fun fact. And yeah, that's interesting because you kind of you get to like apply in real time, or not, maybe not in real time, but like pretty immediately like what you learned from your older siblings and apply it semi
Yeah,
immediately to your younger ones because
yeah,
it's yeah, and it's interesting because it's like one of the things that I never and this doesn't have this is more of a not open ended. The intention is to not answer this question or figure it out, but it's always been this thing of, am I organized because like your your natural self is like that because you're nurtured to be that way because of the birth order because of this family situation, right? And like for a long time, I used to just be like spreadsheets on everything and have lists of everything. But my parents are very much like those people, right? They're very much like list drive their life, but it makes sense just because like with Angela and everything, like if it wasn't organized on some level, like she doesn't do well, right? Which is also really interesting. I'd be curious to see like if Anna has changed in that in that situation where Angela used to be very regimented, and like as she's gotten older, like just due to like not time with change being an adult, like she's much more like she needs the skeleton, but she doesn't need it as regimented as when she was
oh.
younger. I don't know if like Anna has anything like that
I
or
would say
not.
Anna still does.
Okay.
Now to your point, has can we process with her in a more like effective manner where she listens a bit more? Like to give you an example, like
Mm-hmm.
maybe she's 33. So she went to high school till she was 19 in Florida where my parents retired. And then she
Okay.
went to the university that was next to my parents, which is University of Southern Florida,
Mm-hmm.
Central Florida. You can tell I live in Florida. I'm
Yeah.
like Central Florida. That
I
doesn't
don't
make any
know.
sense. I said it's in the South and I called it
Yeah, I'm
Southern.
on the West Coast.
Well,
I have
it's
absolutely no
Central
idea.
Florida, UCF, and it's in
Okay.
Orlando, like literally like a mile from my parents. Like they kind of chose
Okay.
that for a reason because the high school was
Oh,
nearby
it's
and
so close.
and the university had an amazing program for special needs where they would go to school part of the day. It was like an annexed area of the university. Went till she was like 23, and
Okay.
then they would go in and like wipe tables. They would scan books. They would do daycare. So it was like sort of
Okay.
that life skills aspect of it.
Yeah.
And I would say then she would definitely, it was definitely dysregulating for her to have anything change. You know, it was so
Oh.
scripted. We
Okay.
file books this day, we clean the counters this day.
Oh. Right.
This is the day I'm with my best buddy. This is when my parents go to dinner, and then I'm at home, and dad gets me one of these 5 meals. Like, she was
Mm,
really regimented in that way. And I would
okay.
say she still needs, like, to your sister's point, like, still
Yeah.
needs the framework. She still, like, has a hard time when my dad takes her laundry and wants to wash it.
Yeah,
When
on not the same day, same time. Like if it's Tuesday at 6 or whatever, right? Then it's okay. But not if it's like Monday at 3. Then it's like,
Well,
yeah.
even for Anna, it's not the day and time, it's doing it. It's like she
Oh,
sort of has
okay.
had like OCD-ish tendencies, not diagnosed, but more of these are the things I can control in my life. And a
Hmm.
part of it is my belongings in my bedroom. And so, to your point,
Oh.
I definitely think like your sister, like, because in the last couple of years, my parents reached out to my husband and I and
Hmm.
asked us if we would be Anna's guardian, which I kind of knew was coming down the pike. I'd already said that when we first met 22 years ago. And I mean, truly, and we decided not to have kids for many reasons, some medical and some sort of
Okay.
just personal. But
Yeah.
what sort of sent us to the point of, hey, medically, we're having problems. Let's just not have kids. It was, I knew I was going to have Anna, or I felt I was going to. I should
Oh.
say I felt. And
Yeah,
so
and
when
your gut is like you
I was like,
knew like
okay,
yeah. Yeah.
exactly. And then I think like 3-ish years ago, my parents reached
Hmm.
out and sort of formalized that. And I think that has helped because now I think when Anna does get to what you're saying with your sister, like needs the framework, but has a
Yeah.
little bit of flexibility, I think what happens is I tag team with them. They'll text me and say,
Oh,
hey,
okay.
Anna needs to take a shower. We're working on making her bed. She's not letting us wash her sheets. And so I think if you asked me 10 years ago, there would
Yeah.
be screaming, there'd be
Right.
yelling, we'd
Yep.
have to de escalate, and then maybe we could take a sheet while she's like at bowling. Like
Like
they'd have to,
like heavily distracted. Yeah. Like
they'd have
not
to
in the
like
room or
secretly,
something.
like
Yes.
secretively, like she had no idea what was happening till it,
Yeah.
like less
Yeah.
is
Like
more.
after it
Whereas
happened.
now we can start to say, okay, we're going to do it tomorrow. Okay, I'm going to stay on the phone with you while dad picks it up. Okay, we're going to keep me on the
Oh.
bed while you clean your room. So I do
Yeah.
think like your sister, I think she's getting more understanding, but she still has a hard time when things change, if that makes sense.
Yes, that does. Yeah, cuz Angela she's probably at first second grade also, I think, just based
Yeah.
on kind of how she interacts with the world, which she doesn't do any like long form sentence or anything. She kind of just does one word
Yeah.
things and that kind of yeah. She kind of has she. It's interesting because she has like her routine of her talking, which I think is fascinating. But she also likes to participate in groups where if we're all talking, she like wants to participate, even though she doesn't have the vocabulary, but she will still
Yeah.
try.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And would you say, like, with your sister, have you seen your relationship change as you guys have gotten older? And how is that, or if it has changed, how has
Mm.
it changed?
Oh, I think the biggest change was more the when we all moved, more so than us getting older. I think when I was younger, I like quote unquote tried to attempt playing with her right to the level I could. But I feel like when we were living in the same house, it was much more like, oh yeah, I would try to play with her, or I went into like big sister mode where like I'm gonna make you do things, or I'm gonna protect you and do these things, and like right, like I know what's best for you type of thing. So I kind
Yeah.
of was in that mode. Versus I think when I moved out the first time when I got married, we were only like 20 minutes away, so it was just weird not having her, but I feel like that was more of me learning um what things I did due to me and her being in the same house. So I kind of would like,
Mhm.
oh, like she has these habits, and I realized like that's just the way she needs it, not the way I do. So I think
Mhm.
the first phase of kind of like us it changing was just me understanding like what I liked the house to be versus what she did. And then the second time when we moved to Oregon, so she moved um to Santa Cruz, which is like an hour and a half ish south of where my parents live. But I moved to Oregon, which is like, 10 hours north of where they live. And so we happened to move the same week, which was not in planned on any level, but it just conveniently worked out that way that we moved the same week. And so that space has been really interesting because not only am I separated from my parents at that distance and her at that distance, but she also is in her own room by herself without my parents. Yeah. And I feel like that has made the biggest change like ever, just because when I interact with her now, it's much more like I don't feel like I'm in big sister mode. I'm just like, oh, we're just like friends hanging out. I'm just gonna sit here. And like obviously like in your subconscious you're still like running all through the things, making sure she's like fed and like you're not messing with her routine, but like I feel like I show up much more present and available than I did when I was younger, when we were just together all the time. And I think that's a mix of age plus distance. Like I'm sure like that has that I'm sure like, had I moved 15 years ago or something, it would be different. I'd be trying to like bark at her through my video call or something. Yeah.
And do you think that she's gotten more, like, it sounds like she's grown a lot because she is more independent, because she's in sort of that setting that you kind of explained to me when we chatted over this, I guess that was the summer or spring.
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Some
time ago. Yeah.
6 months ago. That's a good estimate.
Yeah.
But I know when you're explaining it to me, Charlene, that was so intriguing, like the work that your parents had done and just sort of the community that had sort of created it. Do you feel like that's been where you guys can be sort of at that friend level? Because regardless of where she's at cognitively, first and second grade, do you feel like she's definitely expanding beyond even that sort of where she was at because of that independence that comes from being independent?
Yeah, she definitely has the space to do things the way she kind of wants to and can learn to do them that way. And it's interesting, right? Because of the distance between me and her, I can only call her X amount of times, right? And it's not that I like don't want to call her more often. It's just because she's more nonverbal than is, like, my phone calls with her are more one-sided than they are two-way. And so when I call her once a month, it's interesting because I kind of get updates from her caretakers or like my parents through other things if things happen. It's kind of, so it's interesting because it's like my knowledge of her cognitive ability is only when I can be with her in person, which is not that frequent. But what's interesting is that can still translate through a phone call on video, and I can tell that she's changed. But I just don't know like how, but I know that it's happened, if that makes sense.
No, totally. I mean, I think about like Liz when she was envisioning and when she was creating the script, because it's still a narrative, it's not a documentary. And when she sort of came up with the idea, it was stress. I'm sure you guys talked about it. It was what's going to happen when our parents pass. And you deal with, as we get older, our parents passing. So that's like a stress. My husband lost both his parents within a year, a couple of years ago.
Oh no,
and
okay.
To like severe Alzheimer's, because his family is older. They were in their mid to upper 80s.
Oh, okay.
And so that going through that as you're in your 40s and 50s of now we're sort of taking care of our parents, and then you compound it with somebody who's, developmentally disabled and living full time in our circumstance with our parents, I think that's like, you bring up a good point. Like Liz was sort of reconciling that stressor of what's going to happen with Anna and how are we going to support her. And then I think what happened through the production of the film and the filming of it was sort of like, there was a reason why it was a proof of concept. It was to see how Anna would do. And then it was also to see how Anna would thrive. And she did. I mean, she is the film. And you really, truly in 4 days saw her independence, her autonomy, her empowerment, and her genuine personality come out through her acting. And that, I truly think, like you said, Charlene, I can't like quantify it exactly. I can't like identify it, besides that I saw the journey of what Liz did to empower her and add and find her own voice in the film. But truly, the conversations we have for the last year, because we filmed it in August and now we're, well, I guess 13 months. That feels like 7 years ago.
Man. Yeah. It's gonna be like, it's been intensive.
Even the conversations I have with her, I have, and I'm somebody in education who works with multiple varieties of people. So I feel like I'm pretty good with the special needs community because of what I do as an educator. But I still learned a lot of how best to communicate with my sister, not as an educator, administrator, or teacher, but as a sister. And so, like your conversation with Angela, I don't know if you've noticed that, but like because I saw that Anna grew and Liz really sort of fostered that, we've been trying to continue to percolate it. So like when I'm having conversations, maybe 5 years ago, what'd you eat for lunch? She would say pizza for like years. And then
I had that conversation yesterday.
I'm good, and that's fine. But it's also now I'm being more specific in my questioning. I'm being more thoughtful about how's your day? Okay, tell me what it looked like. Tell me what you did in the morning, so that then she's generating ideas and she's sort of communicating in more depth than me just saying, okay, that's cool, or mom and dad sort of speaking for her, which happens. And so then now I'm seeing her sort of bring up conversations in our conversations. Like I just talked to her the other night and she's the one telling me about that she has to clean her room. And so we're like, okay, well, put me on the bed and you can tell me when you're done with the toys, or she'll bring up the dog, but they have a new dog and she's working on sort of training the dog and she brings that up. She asks me questions about my husband. She asks me how my day is. So I'm definitely noticing. Now it still is definitely 70-30.
Right, but still, like, but that's a major increase just
like
from
95-5.
Right, exactly.
She's coming up with things that she wants to talk to me about, not just that we're talking, but she wants to talk to me about things. And that's why she's calling, if that makes sense, the difference.
That does.
So I think to like what you're saying with Angela, it's like when you see that sort of pop come off the top and all of a sudden you start giving that individual a little bit more empowerment and advocation and agency, which I think Liz did an amazing job at. It's almost like she's like when Liz and I call all the time, we're at this film festival, you're the star, everybody loves you. And she's like, oh yeah, that's fine. Like
she's like nonchalant, like whatever, like I don't,
like she's so much more humble than we're so excited for her,
right?
And that's where that she knew it was a film. She knew she was acting. She knows that it's cool, but not that big a deal. And so it's just been fun to banter with her and see her humor come out, which she's always had. But I don't think, like Angela, she's been able to articulate it because she didn't have the vocabulary and the fluency. Whereas I like when she comes to live with us, I really want to get her into some programs and where she's reading more and where she's going to classes, so that because once she was done at the university, my parents had done an amazing job to get her into Special Olympics and keep her active. But I think now I want to get her active physically for sure, but now I want to get her more sort of cognitively
active. And kind of like more challenge your mental capacity a little bit and see kind of how you can push her. And obviously like there's limits, but it's just how you can make her feel like she wants to learn and challenge her in good ways that will help. And then she doesn't even realize it sometimes, I'm sure. So you two are in different states right now, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I live in Colorado.
Okay. Yeah. I was like, that will be exciting. I mean, even my sister, when she moved an hour and a half, that was already its own thing. But I mean, I don't know. Is she moving from Florida?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I think it's actually been, Charlene, quite interesting because, like I said, I sort of jokingly told my husband 22 years ago, like, hey, I'm going to get my sister, jokingly, honestly, like, hey, I'm going to get my sister eventually. And he was like, okay, that's cool. Like, he's super laid back, dude.
Yeah.
And it was
sounds like my husband.
You know what I mean? Like, sort of this like written rule that was sort of a joke, but not a joke, but never real. until, like I said, till my parents formally reached out. And it's been kind of interesting. Like, I can't pinpoint, like you said, when your sister just sort of has gotten more independent.
Mhm.
I can't pinpoint, but all of a sudden, in the last 3 or 4 years, she's definitely more attached to me. She's
Oh,
closer. She's always been
interesting.
she's always been close to Liz and I. She's always been close to
Okay.
her female siblings. So that's never
Yeah, so
been,
that's not new information at all,
but
right?
but it definitely swayed towards Molly more so than my
Oh,
sisters. And
interesting.
and I don't think it was like this like epiphanous mom and
No.
dad sat down with Molly and now
Right.
Hannah.
No.
Like,
Yeah,
I don't
no.
think it was that kind of neural connection, but I do think something shifted where her dependency on me and on Pete. I don't know if somehow she connected that she would live with us, because now, Charlene, like the last 3 years, my parents are calling more about helping with sort of the behaviors that are going on. And this is like typical teenage behavior, which I do that for a living.
Yeah,
So it's,
you literally on a day-to-day basis, you're like,
I
story of
mean,
my life.
literally, that's what I
Yeah.
just left 12 hours doing today. But I
Oh
would
no
say, and go
gosh.
back into it tonight. But I would
Yeah.
say that's a part of where I think my parents have sort of utilized me a bit more specifically. Like, I always was helping out with
Oh,
the, hey, Molly's
interesting.
struggling with, but they would talk to a lot of siblings, where it's like, okay, well, let's talk about when you're going to live with us, and when you decorate your room, and you'll have chores, and when you're
Oh,
with a nanny while Pete and I are at work, and you're going to work on
yeah.
these things. So it's been nice to be able to sort of actually connect with her. And to your question about leaving and going to another state, we've
Yeah.
talked about, what would you want your room to look like? What would a day look
Yeah.
like? We're going to have somebody with you. We don't know who that is, but they're going to spend some time with you. You guys will go to the
Yeah.
library. You'll make your bed. You'll make meals. You'll go for walks. You'll go to the rec center. I said, so
Right.
Pete and I will be at work. So it's been kind of interesting. The funny thing, Charlie, I don't know if your sister has said this, and it might be different because she's living independently from your parents, but
Okay.
she's like a normal teenager in the sense that she's like, gets sick of them.
Yeah.
They've lived together for
Yeah.
32 years. How many of us would live
Oh
for
no. The I
32
I
years?
I I thank the Lord every day that I was not at home during the pandemic
I like how you said,
because
thank the Lord.
yeah,
Like, specifically, you're thanking a higher
yeah,
God, like a
yeah,
higher being. Well,
yeah.
to your point, it's
The
really funny.
pandemic, yeah. I'm
She'll,
so
she'll be like,
glad.
can I just move in with you now? And
Right?
I'm like, well, Anna, remember, you're going to miss him a lot. I said, right now you're frustrated, but I said, when you
Yeah.
actually
Once
leave
you
and they can't come back because she's not connecting that. And then
Oh, right,
we
right,
have to
right.
say, okay, when are you going to come live? When mom and dad are in heaven. And I'm like, yeah. So remember, you're going to miss them. It's going to be really
Yeah.
sad. I know they're annoying you right now. So that, I don't know if your sister, because you guys are a bit further away, that's what I'm feeling from my sister is she's anxious to come live with us. She has the
Mhm.
fantasy of what that'll be great, but she doesn't
Yeah.
connect the reality of how much my
How
parents
yeah.
stabilize her.
No, yeah, I know she was frustrated during the pandemic because at that time I only lived 20 minutes away, so they're just you're in the same social circles and whatever. And so it was funny because like between my mom, my dad, and my sister, like cuz I would interact with them separately on, semi or we have separate conversations or whatever. And it
Yeah.
cracked me up because from my perspective, I feel like they were all frustrated with each other, regardless of like who was frustrated with who. They were all just not having it because it's like, because so the thing is that Angela for oh gosh, probably like 3 or 4 years in her high school, middle school through high school kind of period, my mom homeschooled her because she took her out of the public school district just due to some issues and stuff like that. So, and it was nothing that could be resolved at that time, like given
Yeah.
the school and stuff we were at. So my mom was just like, "I'll pull her out," and so I already knew at that time that like they were stuck together like nonstop. And so
Yeah.
when she went back into school, it was great because then everyone kind of got their space again. Like I was working at that time and things like that, so it was fine. Kind of we all moved on, and so it was interesting because then she had her day program, which was great because she was like on a school bus every day. Right, went to do like her bowling, the library, did all the kind of things that you were
Yeah.
mentioning earlier that Anna
Yeah.
did. Right, like kind of you clean these things, you go to this place this day, this place this day, you kind of just like go in circles, but in a good way. And then I moved out before the pandemic because then we got married in 2018. And so the thing is, like, when the pandemic happened, it was like, well, okay, it was hard on everyone, but the thing is, like, because they had to shut down her day program,
yeah,
she not only was like had that whole dysregulation from that, she then was stuck with my mom, who then was trying to at that time she was working part-time for the school that was across the street, or a block and a half away from their house. So she's like on Zoom trying to like work with like kids, and my sister's at home, right? My dad's trying to work from home, and it's like Angela and I, for what it's worth, like the thing that I've noticed, this is the thing I've noticed as we've gotten older, is that my and her personality are very similar. We like to go out. We love people. We love doing things, like meeting people. Like, we're all about it. Like, and we like our like downtime by ourselves, but like we like to be out. Like, it's kind of nice. Like, if you can leave the house to go do something, that's great. Yeah. And so me and her are very like that. I feel like my parents are not those people. I feel like they're much more. They'll like sit at home and read books, sit in chairs, watch TV, take a nap, and like just be done. Like, they won't have to leave if they didn't have to.
Yeah.
And so I feel like during the pandemic, like, she really was like not having it with them, because not only is her day program like not happening right, like my mom's and her scheduling was not in a position to like take her out to go do stuff, even like on our street, just to walk around the block. So she was just really stuck inside. So I know, so when I would interact with them, I knew her frustration was like up the wazoo, just because. And when I saw the three of them, I was like, okay, like I don't know what happened. I just know it wasn't great. But yeah, so that's probably the time I saw her the most frustrated with them. So it's been interesting, like, as she and I knew that she was kind of getting into her teenage mode probably like right before I moved out, because out of all the things that her vocabulary is very limited, but you can still learn new words, right? Like, it's not impossible. Yeah. And so I knew that the day she started saying "go away" all the time, I was like, there you go. There's the teenage. So she'll kick everyone out. She'll kick me out, my dad out, my mom. She like, if she's done with you, she's just like, away. And there's no, you can't negotiate that. She's just like, bye. Or she'll say bye sometimes. Like, it's, so she'll have to, if she's in a mood, she will do that. So I think it's pretty funny, because for the longest time, because my parents, I remember when she first started doing that, like years and years ago, my parents were like, oh man, blah, 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 blah. And I literally was like, she can verbalize to kick you out. Like, that should be an accomplishment to acknowledge, right? Like, that the fact that she has gotten to the point where she can actually tell you, get out of my space, like, that's amazing. Like, yeah.
Well, and it's so interesting you say that, because I think, like, I've noticed Anna's vocabulary has expanded.
Okay.
And I do think it's sort of got definitely fostered through the production of the film, where Liz was sort of, as she, I'm sure, told you, she was sort of saying things, repeating things, and then would draw back and allow Anna to take shape of that. And so I think that challenged her vocabulary. But then it's also, I think it's just been the way we all have sort of evolved with her on that, you know, how like the trajectory, like as she's developing more, we're then sophisticating our conversation back with her. You know, it's almost like that give and take now, because she's formulating more sentences and she's adding more of her personality and her humor in it, then I'm sophisticating what I'm asking her.
Right.
So I noticed some of that happening. So like you said, the away, I definitely think Anna at some points it was punctuated, it was brief, and it was blunt. Versus now, I think it's now got more elaboration in it. Now, do I think it's like above a first grader? No, I still think it toggles between first and second. But do I think within it, she's found sarcasm and tone, which is above a first grader? If you
right.
Like, so there's like this interesting, like, I don't know if you've noticed with your sister, but like when she gets tested, because we do that for guardianship and for when she comes to live with Pete and I. We had to do this to sort of help some of the programming that would happen when she
Oh,
comes
right,
to
yeah.
school.
Mhm.
So I
Like
did
the
as much
evaluation and stuff like
as
that,
I
right?
could
Okay.
until she's physically here. There's only things, there's certain like Medicare, Medicaid you can't do till they're in the state, but the other
Okay.
stuff you can. And
Got
I
it.
noticed like when we did the testing, it was, like IQ and all the other ones that you do for
Yes.
your assessment of your cognitive abilities, it was
Mhm.
still first grade. But then when you saw her sophistication of what she says versus what she reads and writes is far higher. So her verbal. And then it was interesting,
Oh,
like
okay.
her maturity is
Mhm.
definitely teenage. It's not a first grade.
Oh.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then when she
Mhm.
finds humor in certain things, and I'll say something, she'll be like, "Yeah, right. Like that's your thing right now, right?"
Yeah.
And even you hear it in the film where she notices that her tense choice is not correct. When she says like a plural noun with a verb and they're not
Oh,
conjugated correctly, the tense is
yeah.
not correct. She'll actually says that in the film. That is somebody much higher than first grade. First graders are not necessarily formulating
Interesting.
sentences and understanding
Right.
tense, present tense versus past tense. So it's
Yeah.
interesting how she's got aspects of maturity that is definitely 12, 13. But then when she reads and she writes, it's first grade. But her verbalizing, and that's not uncommon when you're doing like a second language too, that you're going to be able to
Okay.
speak more socially than you can
Yes.
read and write. That's always reading and writing is like the
The
last that you get
last. Okay.
fluency on. But it's just been interesting to see her, and I'd be curious if you're seeing that with Angela. Like it's been interesting to see her sort of show her maturity more and just how she's sassy. And
Yeah.
she's sassy like we're all sassy, like
Yeah.
stubborn. That's not first grade stubborn. She doesn't
Yeah.
stomp and yell, you know what I mean? But she definitely gets
Yes.
stubborn and she gets funny. And her level of that is more mature than where she's at, like cognitively, if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
I did notice that. I think like as I remember the first time I made that observation, like way back when probably when we were both I must have been in high school or college, and I remember I was like that was like when she started like her hormones like just started to kick in, right, which is just due to puberty. Well, it is due to puberty, and also like there's a bunch of things that kind of collide together that make it kind of insane. But like I
Yeah.
remember I was like, oh, it's so weird because she is reacting to this situation like she's 15, but like she can only kind of communicate at like kindergarten level,
Yeah.
right? She can't tell me what, but I know that she feels the things of a 15-year-old. So I did notice it, but yeah, I never really thought about it like again, kind of like until like we're talking. I'm like, oh, like yeah, it's kind of this thing where I feel like in my subconscious, I'm very aware of that, and it's funny because then when I talk to other siblings, I feel like we all have that built into how we talk about them. Right? We all know like those nuances, but like you don't like verbalize them out loud necessarily, even though like you've internalized a lot of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, my sister is hilarious. Like she's always made me laugh, but she makes me laugh even more now because I think I think now she knows she's making me laugh. Versus before, I think she was just funny, right? Like because there's people who just naturally fun. Like then they're not trying to make people laugh; they're just being themselves. So I
Yeah.
feel like that was her before, but now I'm like, oh no, I think she's doing it on purpose because she knows that I will laugh at it. So that's kind of the
Yeah.
interesting thing, like the intention behind kind of like how she talks and stuff. Yeah.
Well, I also think she's like, I'm noticing with Anna, she's more vulnerable. Like, I think in the past,
Mm.
when my parents would call any of us, sort of just like, hey, Anna's being a knucklehead, help me,
Yeah.
over
Okay.
like, let's divide and conquer. There's like
Oh
12 of you.
yes.
Can you guys
Right.
each help us? We're kind
Yeah.
of tired. We've been rearing kids for like 40 years. So that's totally understandable.
Yeah.
And I remember it was usually like putting out the fire, whatever was sort of angsty going on or the
Yeah.
dynamic between Anna with our parents.
Okay.
That's normal. But now it's like, and she wouldn't want us to know because she didn't want us to think of her differently. She
Oh,
wanted us to think of
interesting.
her as like the perfect sibling that doesn't get in trouble, that
Yeah, she's
doesn't
like,
do
oh, I'm a
anything
baby, like I'm
bad,
the good kid,
you
like
know.
I'm this. Oh, okay.
Whereas now I feel like in the last, I don't even know how many years, but more recently, like 5 or whatever years, she's
Yeah.
definitely become more like she knows when mom and dad call and it's like a tougher conversation. She doesn't love that I'm called, but
Yes.
she talks about it. Or she tells me what she's worried about or what is stressing her out.
Oh.
Whereas I feel like in the past she didn't want any, and this would she would do this at school. You know, she would
Yeah.
act out on my parents, her frustrations, but she would come to school like she was like the student of the year. You know,
Interesting.
and that's not uncommon in school with special
Okay.
needs that there can be that much
Like a
division
separation.
because she like lets loose, she lets her guard down with my parents, but kind
Right.
of keeps it she keeps it bottled up so that everything is good at school because she doesn't want to get in trouble, you know?
Yes. Yeah.
That's like the juvenile part of her development. But she used to do it with us. Like, don't tell Molly, don't tell Liz, don't tell Katie.
Oh.
You know, I don't want them to know. And now it's like when she knows we know, she's now connecting the ooh, now they know, you know.
Yeah.
Or she's
That's
like, this
so
is what's making me
interesting.
angry, or this is what's frustrating me. You know, she's
Yeah.
so loving and kind. She'll always preface with, I love them, but them, you know, she always does, I still love them,
Yeah.
but I'm
But
really, you know,
yeah.
whereas she wouldn't have told us, I think, because she didn't want us to think differently of her. I don't think
Yeah.
cognitively she was necessarily like overtly processing that, but very much her actions were like that.
Yeah, that's so interesting.
Oh, I
Like
don't want you to think
yeah.
differently. So I feel like that's like a development, like where you are vulnerable with people and you're being more sort of transparent.
Mm.
That's like a higher level, in my opinion, of
Yeah.
sophistication than like when you're 6 and you like steal something and you put it in your pocket. And you think
Right.
everyone knows you put it in your pocket, even though it's this gigantic thing in your pocket sticking out.
Yeah. And I wonder if that's just like I mean, I'm sure it's a whole multitude of things, but I'm sure that's in a combination with like as people treat you like you're old, I'll use quote unquote older because I don't have other language for that at the moment. But like, yeah, like as kind of like we were talking about, like the give and take, like as she grows and you treat her that it's almost like it opens a gate to then that part of it, right? Because
Yeah.
part of it is a 6-year-old won't do it because they're just gonna treat you like you're 6, versus like when that 10 years later, like you would hope that their parents or their friends or their cousins or relatives, whatever, would then treat them like, hey, you are older, you need to kind of like not partially own up to it, but partially like acknowledge like, hey, what are you doing? So it's kind of interesting how that like all like plays in together. And then I know that you have to kind of go soon-ish, so I want to make sure we have enough time for you to like give your encouragement to Ariel, or you can finish off whatever last thoughts, and then if we can jump into encouragement after that. Yeah.
I'm open. I have 10 minutes, so I'm totally cool with whatever.
Okay. Yeah.
You're the expert at this, so you tell me.
Yeah. However, I will leave the encourage. We can jump to encouragement just because I know sometimes like depending on what it's a mixed bag because some people will be very short, some people kind of have a longer winded thing. So I just want to make sure in the event that you get inspired as you're talking that we have space for it. Yeah.
And what am I doing?
If you could give some words of encouragement to other other fellow special needs siblings listening to the podcast.
I would say, I don't know if it's like encouragement or just more like allyship.
That
Like
works too.
like,
Whatever you think is appropriate. Yeah.
I'm always in a positive person, so it'll definitely be more towards encouragement, but more of the, I think what has been sort of cool that surfaced when my husband and I knew we were going to be guardians to Anna, we've been more intentional with sort of how do we prepare because she's in Florida and we're in Colorado? How do we, and then knowing that we're going to mess up and make mistakes like any guardian or parent that's never done it. And so cutting ourselves some slack and sort of being empathetic to that. But then I also said, I think I would say the encouragement is sort of the amazing community that I think, and I definitely will give credit to my sister, Liz. So she can say I've never, can't tell me that I've never said that.
Right.
But but I would say like really a testament to her passion for this and her pursuit of this and wanting to build community because of her film, I think has even deepened my excitement for allyship and just being a community together. So that would be my sort of like encouragement is when and because of what we've been doing with the film and as I've been contemplating, I live in a very small rural mountain ski town in Colorado. And I've been thinking about like we live 80 miles from the city. And
Oh,
so
that's pretty far.
and there are programs in the city, just like my parents have Special Olympics in Orlando. We have it in Denver. But then when we get 9,000 feet and 80 miles away, there's different ways that we can create community. And so I would say the encouragement is sort of we were very intentional about staying here. There was probably a point maybe 4 or 5 years ago that maybe we loosely talked about me ending my career in Florida, being where 6 siblings live now where my parents are. It's become sort of a popular place because we grew up kind of going there and Midwest in the cold. You sort of get away.
Warm all the time, because you're still in cold right now.
It's definitely, I'm sure, a byproduct. But I think the other part of encouragement would just be that there's such an amazing community that I think has broadened because of the film, deepened because of where I'm at in this process of knowing in the next 3 to 5 years Anna will live with us and thinking and trying to as best we can think ahead, that I think I've been so appreciative of the literature that I've read, of the people that you reach out and say, hey, this is what we're talking about, and this is what we want to build through ARC, Real Abilities, SIBS with Disabilities, SIBS Network, Korean American adoptees. Like there's just been such as like this like amazing interconnected communities of individuals that are with marginalized populations, including disability, that it's just been really awesome to, like you said, there's like intersections of commonality that we all have as just guardians and siblings. And how do we support this sibling that can't live, that has struggles to live fully independently? And we're going to be sort of their support system as our parents pass. But then it's also been like super cool to realize that the differences are what kind of helps us better understand how to do this. Because like even we've had people that have come up to Liz crying, of course, because it's a pretty emotional. It's not a comedy. It's got comedic elements, but it's definitely emotionally driven film. But I think what's been cool is when we showed it to ARC in New York, and Liz was there, and I was on Zoom. We had SIBs that were guardians of SIBs at the screening, and they said resoundingly, and this is we've been in front of like mainstream audiences, but not SIBs with siblings.
Okay.
And so they even commented to Liz, which I thought was awesome. Like, absolutely, the sister is not going to be mourning and the guardian, and she's going to be focused on sort of what's the next task, what's the next thing we need to do. Because when you become a guardian, you sort of remove the mourning of your parents and you focus on that sibling. So it was just interesting that Liz intuitively sort of put that in the film, but it resonated within our community. So that's kind of my encouragement, is there is so much in just we talking with each other and sharing stories with one another. Like I've been in some conferences for equity, and what bonded us was not the national equity work we were doing, which was more race-based. It was the fact that both of us had adult siblings that were living with our parents that eventually we would be the guardians of.
Wow, that's such a different, I mean, like it's different, but it's not like that. That's crazy though. That's what the bonding point was. Like what? That's so interesting. Huh.
Like we've met so many people that when you bring up the themes of the movie, disability, inclusion, representation, caregiving, and there's so many people that have either good friends that are in that situation or they're directly involved. And then we all, if we're close to our parents, are thinking about caregiving.
Yeah.
And what do we do when they get older and they become the kid and we become the parent?
Right.
So it's really cool. Like, I think that's the encouragement I would say, is that the community is broad. The community is, the ones that we've reached out have been so open arms and let's talk together. This isn't, I'm the expert, you're the expert. It's that we are going through something with a commonality. And so that's like what I think when Charlene, you reached out to Liz and our conversations and relationship started, was just knowing we had a through line.
Yeah.
So that would definitely be my encouragement, is just, I am so impressed with, and I'm going to try to work better with keeping those relationships up, because I do live in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, and that's why we have the internet, where me and you can chat, because we're in 2 different states, so it's great. Like, definitely doable. Yeah.
It's been tremendous in that way, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah, it's and it's cool, because me, you, and Liz are all 3 different states, and I just got to talk to her, so it's cool. Like, it's been the fun part about, like, meeting people all over the world. It's like time zones, it's like, it's fun. Like, I can wake up, because I'm on the West Coast, I'm like the latest time out of everyone, so I'd have to wake up early, but it's fine. And it's like, it's so cool just to meet all sorts of people all over the world.
Well, I also think because my husband and I are going to be new at this and totally going to screw up all the time, that I want to lean on those, like being a new parent, and say, you know, what did you guys do, and how did you approach it? And I mean, it's just like being an educator. You just try different things and you talk to people that are better at it, and you talk through and you observe. And so I feel like being a part of a community is the best part, because we are very unfamiliar with this. We're just kind of going with it, but we're leading on others to be like, hey, these are some ideas to try.
Yeah. Yeah. Community is a very powerful thing. Yeah. And then with that, thank you for being on the podcast, Molly.
Of course. And thank you so much for the time and being able to highlight the film as well. We really appreciate it, because it's been an honor to just be along the ride. And if we can get it to a feature, then that will be an even lengthier conversation, hopefully.
Yeah. That'll be exciting. Cool. Yeah. Thanks. Thanks for listening to the Special Needs Sibling Podcast. I hope you had a good time listening and feel encouraged in your own journey as a sibling to someone with special needs. If you liked this episode, please share it with your friends. And if you want to hear more stories, please subscribe to the show. You can find us wherever you listen to podcasts. Also, the show can't happen without you. All special needs siblings have their own unique stories, challenges, family dynamics, and lots of life to talk about and explore. This podcast is here to let you know that you're not alone and that you matter. If you would like to be on the show or just chat off the record, please contact me. My info is in the show notes. Until next time, this is the Special Needs Sibling Podcast.